Okay, just to get an idea of who's here, put your hand up if you're a sabbatical officer from a students' union. If you're a staff member from a students' union. If you're a university staff member. And if you're from Warwick. Hooray. Okay, great. So I've been tasked to talk a bit about what we've been doing here. Carrying on from what Stephen said earlier, this isn't necessarily about best practice, but it's just about the way that we're thinking about things here and what we're doing. So I'll just quickly tell you who I am. My name's Leo. I am a Politics and International Studies graduate. As you can tell by my accent, I'm by no means British, and nor am I American, Canadian, or Irish, which are the usual assumptions for my accent. And I'm the current Warwick SU president. There's me on a protest being angry and foreign. This is a good way of integrating international and home students, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. So over the last 2 years in particular, the Students' Union has been refocusing its sort of vision in terms of international students and also with that integration. But one of the biggest questions that we have to ask ourselves is how can we actually make these kinds of visions sustainable? How can we actually make sure that what we're not doing is just throwing activities out there over and over and over again and assuming that that's exactly what international students want, or rather that those are things that are improving integration without actually evaluating that kind of outcome? And this is actually where the relationship with the university is very crucial, because in collaborating with the university you get some kind of idea of continuation. So what's next? So let's start with a few premises that we've been thinking of and that we've been in discussions about with the university. So firstly, there's this idea that unions exist to improve the university experience of students studying at their partner institution and must be accessible to all students. Unions are here for students, and universities like unions because of that. Great. Second premise. Unions are where the university community is created and fostered. If unions didn't exist, something like them would be created because students would want to interact with each other around common interests. Third premise. Unions and universities want to improve integration on campuses. If you weren't interested, you probably wouldn't be here. But sort of capturing all of those questions or all of those premises is this sort of overarching point, which is how can we do all of these things without knowing what an integrated campus actually looks and feels like? And I refer back to my comment. Just throwing out international student events or integration events over and over again without necessarily knowing what the ultimate goal is, how can you actually know whether you're doing it successfully? So I'll just tell you a bit about the history at Warwick. So a few years ago, or in the early 2000s, I think, there was this question that was posed by one of my predecessors around accommodation. Is it right that international students could have the option to be housed together without actually living with any locals? And the answer was, well, it's not exactly the best thing to do. So ultimately what happened was the university changed its own policy to allow to ensure that in every hall of residence there were at least 2 international students, but never that the entire hall was completely international. That's obviously a very small step towards this integration question, but the point is that that's when really all of these discussions at Warwick started, and it's certainly when international students and this question of integration came onto the radar. So when I was a student here, I was really perturbed by the way in which the union was almost defensive about how it approached international students. On the one full page that talked about international students in the SU guide, it had things like, in the UK, people say please and thank you. In the UK, people queue up. And I immediately thought, well, this is really patronizing, because actually I'm coming here for the exact same reasons as a lot of home students are, and suddenly there's this artificial psychological barrier that's putting up in front of me where my union assumed that I didn't know what was going on here or why I was in the UK or indeed what the cultural norms were. So my reality, during my time here, I noticed that through the activities that were being put on by the union, a lot of them were to do, again, sort of a branded integration or international and so on. And the reality was that actually it was about saying to home students, look at these people, they're foreign, and how amazing are they? Just look, observe, how fantastic are these people? They're different, great. But that's not integration. That's saying, look, you're actually existing in a community which is different to the one that you might have come from before. But there was no question around actually saying, you as a home student or as an international student, you have to go and question the other. You should go and interact with them around common interests and so on. Although that did happen, but the overt efforts by the union were almost done to sort of force integration, which never really took off in my mind. So this comes to this point that integration must be based on proactivity within mutual interests. In order to actually do the best that you can do or get the most out of an experience that you really want to use to get the best university experience, you have to relate to and interact with other people who want to achieve the same goal. If you are playing badminton, you're playing doubles, and I'm a home student and my partner is a Chinese student who I've never met before, to do well, I have to actually communicate with him. It's not enough just to kind of sit there and go, I know he's different, but that's okay. You have to actually, you all have the same goal, so the idea is to actually interact with them and engage with them in order to get to the common goal. So what I realized this year was that the university runs this fantastic orientation program, which is by no means uncontroversial amongst home students. It's a week where 1,100 international students come. It's pretty much split 50-50 between postgrads and undergrads. And the union never really had anything to do with it. And we saw that as a really, or I saw that as a really big sort of missed opportunity. So this is the one kind of example I'll focus on in terms of collaboration. What we kind of acknowledged was that in order for students to actually, for international students and home students to really be comfortable in the same space, they have to be able to relate to a common interest to the same extent. Perhaps in different ways, but to the same extent. So what I was determined to do was to ensure that everything that, that was involved in the orientation program and schedule and the lead up to it and the way that everything ran was all about not saying, you're an international student, you can do this too, you can enjoy this as well, but rather it was about saying, this is what we're doing for you generally. We might have to, we had to explain it in slightly different terms, sure, but we weren't saying, we weren't starting with the assumption that if we didn't tell you this, you wouldn't get involved. We were simply going and saying, here are the activities, as we would with home students the following week, or as we did with home students the following week. So, as I sort of said, we had a really big input into the schedule, which was great. That wasn't just the stuff to do with the Students' Union, it was about the advice days, it was about the trips, it was about everything that had to do with the schedule. And the biggest challenge was really trying to get the other SABs and the staff within the union to actually buy into it. Because not only did they have to actually suddenly start to do things for this week, but they had to push everything back by a week because Freshers Week was the week after. So they had to prepare everything for Freshers a week before. And it worked. And I was really, really impressed and almost flattered by the fact that this happened. And also, obviously, this meant that sabbatical officers and staff had to go out of their own comfort zones when they were sort of deciding exactly how they're going to be running this week alongside sort of the schedule that I put together with the international office. So some of the stuff that you have in your packs relates to this. We put together videos, guides, menus, activities, evening events, fairs, all kind of centered around the Students' Union. So sabbatical officers were there almost all the time. But not to say, you can approach me, even though you're international, but to say, this is my role. If you want to get the most out of your society's experience, you can talk to me, I'm the society's officer. Not, you might be an international student who doesn't know what a society is, and you have no idea what unions are, and don't know why you've even come to the UK, but hey, it's fine, because I'm here for you. Because that's patronizing, and again, it puts up a psychological barrier that I think is completely unnecessary and unwarranted. So the outcomes of this week, so I'm going quickly because I am conscious of the time. So we're talking about this question of measurement. So how do we know that this actually made an impact? Did it? Well, we think it did, because the way that we measure, the way that we interpret integration with regards to the union itself is by seeing the number of international students engaging with things that are non-culturally specific. That's sort of how we gather whether we do well. So we've seen more first-year and master's international students running in union council elections, running in course rep elections, voting in officer and union council elections involved in non-culturally specific societies and also sports clubs. Again, it's about assuming that there is a common interest that people will have from different backgrounds. In order to get the most out of that experience, they have to not perceive a barrier to exist, and they have to go in and assume that, and engage with the others who are also interested in achieving that same goal to get the best out of their experience. So, integration for us means international students becoming more active in non-culturally specific elements of the university experience. International students relating to the union to the same extent as domestic students. That doesn't mean in the same way. We're not expecting international students to perhaps go out as much as home students would during Freshers, but it's about them understanding that there's a rapport that we have created with them as a union. Because in order for students to enjoy a certain element of their university career, they have to encounter and engage with others who are equally interested in relevant opportunities. Again, everyone has the same goal within a specific opportunity. It's about actually interacting and engaging within that. So something that you have in front of you, and this is an older version, but is a sort of a table that I came up with, which kind of explains that basically there are different ways that you can expect international students and home students to actually engage. Obviously, integration is a two-way process. It's not just about home students changing their behavior. It's very much about people arriving at a university and having to interact to get the best experience they can possibly have. So the one that I would focus on is this active engagement, the third one down, which is where I think there's the greatest opportunity to collaborate with university. Again, this is where the biggest impact can be found, and also the most measurement can be done in an effective way. So this is where you have interests, like I was saying before, like badminton, or like specific societies, or sort of talents of music, food, things that you can really appreciate from a similar base. And what I was going to just lead on to very quickly is so the day is very much about thinking about what you can do with your union or university to improve integration, but actually acknowledging that you have to figure out how you know if it's going to be successful. Because it's not enough to say, yeah, no, we did that, tick box, because that doesn't necessarily achieve anything. Because if it if you don't measure it, you won't know if it's failed in the first place. And if it does work, then you'll want to know how to continue that good work. So what does integration on campuses look like? So I just wanted to say one last thing, which is that the Center for Applied Linguistics people who should be in the room somewhere, apart from Helen, they will be facilitating sessions throughout the day. They'll be walking around writing things down that you're saying, obviously not kind of taking your name or anything, because the idea is that at the end we're going to produce a report, which is going to go to everyone here, with suggestions, recommendations about which are drawn from the discussions that you're going to be having. Ultimately, none of us are good at this, because none of us know what we want. Because as soon as you say we're going to do something to improve integration, it sounds kind of obvious, but none of us do it. You have to say, and how do we know if we will have done it in an effective and efficient way? Also, needless to say, for NUS people and for students' union people, there is going to be a hashtag which we'll be checking out and using for the report. The hashtag will be WIS, and it'll help with the report writing. If you have any comments, suggestions, questions, or just updating us on what's going on, please feel free to use that hashtag on Twitter. Thank you very much. Have a very insightful and productive day.
Okay, everybody, this is where our logistics and systems will hopefully work. You will have a badge around your neck, maybe. On the back, I don't have any words. We should have either Group A or Group B written on there. We try to keep universities and their students' unions together. So at this point, we would like those people who are in Group A, have Group A written on the back of their name badge, to move out of this door, and you will sort of turn right and go to sort of the far room, which should be at 1.11. Like my colleague Viv there, the Cornwall Legion there, will have some facilitators there to get you speaking and working through some questions. Our Deputy Vice-Chancellor mentioned earlier that we came runner-up in the NUS Internationalisation International Experience Awards. That will get to hear Rebecca Bridger, President of the Loughborough Students' Union, who are the winners of that category. She'll tell you a little bit about projects that Loughborough and Warwick are doing to collaborate between their universities and students' unions. Group B will stay in this room just for the moment, and you'll get Leo very much giving you the same information, so you can come back to the front in a second. So Group A would like to move out through the door and be led round to the room 2 doors down, 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 room